On February 7, 2017, a Department of Water Resources operator watching the main spillway at Oroville Dam saw the water do something it had never done in 49 years. It buckled. A ripple moved upstream against 100,000 cubic feet per second of flow. Water was coming up through the concrete, not down the chute, up through the joints. Somewhere underneath that slab, pressure had found a way in, and the slab was losing. They shut the gates, and when the inspection crew got down to the chute, they found a hole. 250 feet long, 180 feet wide, 40 feet straight down into the hillside. The concrete was gone. The rock underneath was gone. Where a 50-year-old spillway floor should have been, there was a canyon that had not existed 6 hours earlier. That was day one. By February 9th, inflow into Lake Oroville hit 190,000 cubic feet per second. Northern California had just come out of a 5-year drought, and the watershed above the dam received a full year of average rainfall in 50 days. The lake was rising a foot every few hours, and the only way to release water was through the spillway that now had a crater the size of a city block blown through the middle of it. They turned the water back on, through the crater, because the alternative was worse. By February 10th, the hole had doubled, 500 feet long, 300 feet wide, 45 feet deep. New channels were cutting around the chute walls into the abutment hillside, and the plunge pool at the bottom was filling with 1 million cubic yards of debris. And then, on February 11th, something happened that had not happened since 1968. Water reached elevation 901 feet and spilled over the emergency spillway weir for the first time in the dam's history. That weir had stood there for 49 years. Nobody had ever seen water on the other side of it. The flow over the emergency spillway peaked at about 12,600 cubic feet per second. That sounds like a lot. It was 4% of design capacity. 4%, and the unlined hillside below the weir started tearing apart in hours. Headward erosion was cutting back toward the weir foundation so fast that engineers watching from the dam crest could see it moving in real time through drone footage. On Sunday, February 12th, at 4:45 in the afternoon, Butte County Sheriff Corey Honia issued a mandatory evacuation order. The National Weather Service broadcast, officials now anticipate a failure of the auxiliary spillway in 60 minutes. This is not a drill. 188,000 people had 30 minutes to leave. Highway 70 and Highway 99 became parking lots for 4.5 hours. Gas stations along the escape routes ran dry. Amtrak rerouted passengers by bus. Union Pacific stopped every train between Sacramento and Redding. And downstream, fish and wildlife crews were loading millions of baby salmon from the Feather River hatchery onto trucks, because nobody was sure the hatchery would be there in the morning. The dam was never in danger. Not for 1 second. Oroville Dam is a 770-foot earthfill embankment. It is the tallest dam in the United States. The dam crest sits 21 feet above the emergency spillway crest. Physically, mathematically, the dam cannot be overtopped by the spillway failing. What was at risk was the concrete lip of the emergency weir. If that weir had been undermined, up to 30 vertical feet of reservoir water would have released in an uncontrolled flow down the Feather River. That is catastrophic. That is worth evacuating for. But it is not a dam break. The forensic team that investigated afterward spent a year producing a 584-page report. They identified 24 separate physical contributing factors on the main spillway alone, and not one of them involved the dam. Like and subscribe if you want to see what they actually found. Because it is worse than a dam break. It is a 50-year-old failure that everybody watched happen, and nobody stopped. The cracks in that spillway slab had been documented since 1969, 1 year after the dam was dedicated. Water was getting under the concrete from the very beginning. The drain system was undersized and partially clogged. The anchor bolts holding the slab to the rock were only 5 feet long, and some were corroded. The rock underneath the failure point was not the competent bedrock the original 1960s design had assumed. It was weathered, fractured amphibolite, with zones of material so soft you could break it with your hands. In 2005, 3 environmental groups told FERC that the emergency spillway hillside would erode catastrophically if it was ever used. They filed the paperwork. A FERC engineer named John Onderdonk wrote back that the structure would perform as designed. FERC denied the request to armor the hillside. The estimated cost at the time was $100 million. 12 years later, the repair cost $1.1 billion. Kiewit Infrastructure West won the prime contract with a bid of $275 million. They had 10 days to bid. They mobilized within a month, and they had 165 days to rebuild the main spillway of the tallest dam in the United States before the next rainy season. At peak, they had more than 500 pieces of heavy equipment on a site covering 400 acres. 12 lattice cranes and 2 hydraulic cranes worked the spillway at the same time. GPS-guided excavators placed roller-compacted concrete in 1-foot lifts. On-site rock crushers processed 2.3 million tons of aggregate, and some of that aggregate was the crushed remains of the original 1968 spillway. The new spillway literally contains its broken predecessor inside it. Like and subscribe. This is the part where the machines get weird. The spillway chute drops at a 25% grade. Dragging concrete screeds up that slope by hand was slow and brutal, so Kiewit's fabrication team welded together a leveling rig from spare parts: a 37-foot screed beam, a carrier frame, portable electric winches, and crane lifting eyes so the whole thing could be flown to the next pour. They called it the Franken-Screed. It had no manufacturer, no model number, no manual. It was born on that hillside, and it died there. The second invention was even stranger. Roller-compacted concrete superintendent Phil Kelly needed to finish roller-compacted concrete across the emergency spillway splash pad, an area the size of 25 NFL football fields. So he welded a custom steel plate to the dipper arm of a hydraulic excavator, replacing the bucket, and turned it into the largest concrete trowel in North America. 1 operator, 1 seat, GPS guidance, smoothing concrete across 1 million square feet. That machine had no serial number. It was built in the on-site fab shop, and when the project ended, it was disassembled. The crews ran around the clock, Monday through Saturday, plus a single shift Sunday. Temperatures exceeded 100 degrees. Wildfire smoke from nearby fires pushed the project under evacuation advisory at one point, while CAL FIRE air tankers refilled their belly tanks from the reservoir directly above the worksite. Kiewit was burning through $2.5 million of work per day. They poured 504 separate concrete placements in the 2018 season alone. And they made the deadline. November 1st, 2017 for Phase 1. The spillway was operational again by April 2019. But here is where the money story gets ugly. The original estimate was $100 to $200 million. The Kiewit bid was $275 million at 30% design completion. By January 2018, the number was $870 million. By September 2018, it was $1.1 billion. The foundation excavation went deeper than anyone planned because the bedrock under the emergency spillway was weaker than the 1960s geology reports claimed. When the forensic team asked what went wrong, Kiewit project director Jeff Peterson put it simply: "It is like when you go to the dentist and the cavity is bigger than you think." FEMA approved $337 million in reimbursement, then notified California that some reconstruction work was ineligible. The rest of the bill went to the 29 state water contractors, the public water agencies from Silicon Valley to San Diego. Their ratepayers are still paying for a spillway that cracked in 1969. That spillway is operational today. The original emergency weir is still there, but underneath it now sits a 1,450-foot secant pile cut-off wall, drilled 35 to 65 feet into bedrock, and a roller-compacted concrete splash pad that weighs more than most buildings in Oroville. And one more thing. When they built the original Oroville Dam in the 1960s, they invented a rollover car dumper that could unload entire trains without uncoupling the cars. After the dam was finished, that car dumper was dismantled, shipped to Western Australia, and installed at BHP's Mount Newman iron ore operation at Port Hedland. The dimensions of that dumper defined the dimensions of every iron ore railcar BHP has built since. A piece of Oroville's 1960s construction is embedded in one of the largest mining operations on Earth. And back in California, the spillway they poured with those same trains cracked within a year of filling the reservoir. We checked. We read the 584 pages. And we think the real story is not that the spillway failed. The real story is that everybody knew it would, and the only people who said it out loud were 3 environmental groups that nobody listened to in 2005. If that made you think, like and subscribe. We cover the equipment stories the industry remembers, but that were never recorded. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever worked on a job where everybody knew something was wrong and nobody said anything?